Jacob is a teacher. He made 40 cookies to give to his students on the first day of school. He gave 2 cookies to each student who showed up for class. Let C sub n be the remaining number of cookies Jacob had before the nth student arrived. C sub n is a sequence. What kind of sequence is it? Jacob is starting with 40 cookies. So I'm going to write that out. We have 40 cookies here. And then Jacob is giving 2 cookies to each student who shows up for class. So Jacob has 40 cookies before any students walk in the door. And then after one student walks in, he's given away 2 cookies. So then he has 38 cookies. And then as soon as the next student walks in, he gives away 2 of them. So then he has 36 and then 34 cookies and so on, losing, or I should say giving away 2 cookies as each new student walks through the door. So we have our starting value here, which is 40. The next thing we want to figure out is this a situation where we have common differences or common ratios? In other words, are we adding or subtracting the same number at each step, or are we multiplying or dividing by the same number at each step? Well, since he's giving away 2 cookies at each step, then we know that we are subtracting by the same number at each step. We're subtracting by 2 at each step. So 40 subtract 2 is 38. 38 subtract 2 is 36. 36 subtract 2 is 34, and so on. So this is the sequence. We have our starting value of 40, which I'll write out here. We have a starting value of 40. And we have a common difference of -2. You might be tempted to look at this and think that there's a common difference of +2 because this is a +2 here. But remember, he's giving these cookies away. And so the number of cookies he has at each step is 2 less. He's subtracting 2 from his total number of cookies at each step. So the kind of sequence that this is a arithmetic sequence. This is an arithmetic sequence, which means that we have a common difference. We are adding or subtracting the same number at each step in this sequence. Now we've answered the question that this asks, but let's actually write out the forms, or the explicit and recursive forms for this situation. Let's start with the explicit form. And so let's see, I will write that out. I will write that out in purple. So here we're going to have our explicit formula. And for our explicit formula, we take these 2 pieces of information and we assemble them into the formula that defines the sequence. So remember, we named the sequence C sub n. And so C sub n is equal to whatever our starting value is, which is 40. And then remember, we're subtracting 2 at each step. So subtract 2, and then we multiply that by n subtract 1. And then we multiply that by n subtract 1. So this is the explicit formula for the sequence, and we could use this explicit formula to find out what, say, the 10th term in the sequence was. So in other words, how many cookies Jacob had before the 10th student arrived. So let's write that out. So we have C sub 10, and that will be equal to 40 subtract 2 times, let's see, we have n is equal to 10, so 10 subtract 1. Then we can simplify this right-hand side here. We have 40 subtract 2 times 9, and then 40 subtract 18, and 40 subtract 18 is equal to 22. And so before the 10th student arrives, Jacob has 22 cookies left. Let's write out the recursive formula for this situation. This is the recursive formula, or the recursive form of the equation. And remember, for the recursive form, we use these same 2 pieces of information, but we write it out as a piecewise function. So we use these curly braces here, and we write out what our a sub 1 value is equal to, which is 40. And then we write out what our a sub n value is equal to. So a sub n is equal to whatever the previous term was, which is a sub n subtract 1, and then we subtract from that 2. So to take the same example of, I said a here, really this is, let me fix this. The sequence is not a, it's c, and so we have c sub 1 and c sub n, okay? So if we wanted to find out what c sub 10 was, then that would be equal to c sub 10, that would be equal to c sub 10 subtract 1 minus 2. So whatever the 10 subtract 1, whatever the ninth term, whatever c sub 9 is, we would subtract 2 from that to get c sub 10. And I'm realizing I've got one more a here that I need to fix. There we go. C sub n subtract 1. Okay, so the explicit formula, the recursive formula, and I think, let's see, we have the sequence, the kind of sequence written out. It's an arithmetic sequence, and then we went above and beyond. We wrote out the explicit formula for the sequence, which is here, and then we wrote out the recursive formula for the sequence, which is here.